Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, as usual, we want to ask you to please leave a like, to share, to subscribe to our channel, and also we want to thank you for making our last episode one of our most seen videos on this channel. Help us continue to grow the channel, and more importantly, please check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle and help us continue to do the work that we do. So many topics, as usual, to discuss this week. We're gonna get into many different areas. We're gonna go, from West Asia to Southeast Asia. Many things happening, but we want to start somewhere that with a kind of a recurring character of this here podcast, the man who makes Donald Trump weak in the knees. I'm talking about Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Mohammed al-Julani. A very interesting report this week about the self-appointed president of Syria that says that in 2023, a British NGO called Intermediate, with ties to Tony Blair, with ties to current officials in the Labour government, was behind the makeover of this, former Al Qaeda commander, ISIS deputy commander, into to turn him from a terrorist to a statesman, right? When he was the de facto ruler of Idlib, before becoming the de facto ruler of Syria, right? And this ties into a video that we shared last week in our social media channels that went up pretty viral, in which former U.S. Ambassador Robert Ford boasts about his role in helping, rehabilitate the image of this head chopper, as we often refer to Shara here, with good reason. And also, one last thing I want to mention before I let you guys go on. This intermediate talks about working with Shara in 2023. Here at the Cradle, if you go back to around, I think, February 2023, we have a couple of reports talking about how Qatar was funding and pushing for HTS, for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the former Nusra Front, former Al-Qaeda in Syria, to be rehabilitated, and for Shara/Jolani to also be rehabilitated. So this is something that we have been talking about for a few years now. Only now we're getting the confirmation of just how deeply the UK government was embedded in rehabilitating the image of this man. So with that being said, what do you guys make of this entire situation?
I have to say that this recent report, digging deeper into this UK NGO that a former U.S. Ambassador Robert Ford disclosed in his talk last week, is you know I've always said since the Cradle's inception that we really need to cover British activities. Everyone sort of like globs on to the destructive American role in this region, which is for sure there. But very quietly, the British intelligence, British security forces, British special ops are seeding this chaos throughout the region. Sometimes they're on the front line doing the dirty work before the Americans even get there. And this is one such example. I mean, it's very interesting to note that according to this article, Intermediate, the UK NGO, was founded in 2011. It's the year of the so-called Syrian revolution against Bashar al-Assad, right? Was founded by Jonathan Powell in 2011. He previously served as chief of staff to former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair is, he presided over the Afghanistan invasion, the Iraq war, these dirty dossiers, lies, intrigue. And then, after destroying this region and killing millions in this region, he then gets like plucked out to head up that quadrilateral organization to like bring peace to Palestine, Israel, which is a joke. This man is the devil incarnate. Jonathan Powell, the head of this British NGO, stepped down from Intermediate when? In December. In December, just as Shara's Al Qaeda slash HTS forces took over Damascus. Okay. He stepped down from the organization last December after being appointed national security advisor by the new British Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, which means Jonathan Powell did his job. He brought Al Qaeda to the helm. Basically, this is the element of Al Qaeda that are completely Western intelligence tools. And he did his job and he got an award, and that was National Security Advisor. Where he handles all these like vital security issues that are never out in the public domain. So basically, they did this turnaround. But what's funny? We're talking about how um, intermediate and UK intelligence basically was trying to what's that word? Was trying to not resuscitate to yeah was trying to change and polish Al Qaeda's image starting in 2011, before Al Qaeda or Al Nusra, which is the Al Qaeda affiliate in Syria, was even on the scene in Syria. So in 2011, this is what was going on. Um, but there's other signs of their rehabilitation. I mean, the first thing we noticed, of course, was Abu Muhammad al Jolani in a suit. Okay, like let's have those pictures up there in a suit. He went from like, jihadi style fatigues to a suit overnight. But what's even funnier, and a friend of mine, a Syrian friend of mine who's so keyed in to, I mean, sort of impartial Syrian, very keyed in to governance, politics, economy of Syria, sent me this picture, and it's worth noting. It's the um, this Syria's new defense minister. So the new Al Qaeda linked defense minister. His name is Morhaf Abu Qasra, also known as Abu Hassan 600. 600 is the English version of شو بالعربي?
Abu Hassan Zitmi.
Yeah. He was appointed defense minister by Shara. The guy was responsible for the organization's drone unit, and when he was named defense minister, a whole bunch of stuff came out about him. Okay, and I will go into this in detail. But the defense minister of Syria, the Al Qaeda linked defense minister of Syria, has had a nose job. I mean, he had, yeah, a big old Semitic hook nose, okay, as you can see in the picture before. And then you have this like cushy little nose after that maybe makes him more palatable to like, global audiences. I have no idea why, but I mean, they changed his face completely for this task. So that's how involved British intelligence services were in rehabilitating Al Qaeda and putting beautiful filters on them too. You know, Abu Ghasra has been accused of wait, just I'll read this off and I'm done. 20 premeditated murders. These are the crimes he's been allegedly committed while he was in Idlib, all right? And key figure in Al Qaeda there. 20 premeditated murders, 15 armed robberies, 12 amputations, 150 executions of Shias, Christians, and atheists, 15 cases of stoning to death, and 10 cases of rape of female captives. Okay. These guys even took nuns as hostages, and they thought they could wipe out that criminal record by giving this guy nose job. Hilarious. By the way, we did an article on him like some months ago, which you can find on the Cradle. It's called "In Syria, the Lunatics Are Running the Asylum" on the Cradle. Check it out.
What do you think, Karim, of the rehabilitation, of the rehabbing, of the surgery, the whole package that these Al Qaeda commanders are getting now?
Because all the countries they want to provide security for Israel, and because most of the Arab countries see Iran as the real threat, not Israel. Everybody agreed to rehabilitate these guys, and we know usually Turkey and Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar usually they always clash in this region, except in Syria. They all agreed on Sharia and his cabinet, including Abu Hassan Sitmi, who is accused of killing many people. And also, we have video of him after he was elected. A guy came holding a sword and gave him poetry or said to him poetry, and including this poetry, he calls for killing and beheading Christian, and the video is online. Anybody can see it. So I think this is why everybody agreed, including also the West, to rehabilitate all these guys, including of course Zulani and the guy that we're talking about, the Mr. Sitmi, Mr. 600. And now we all know the human rights and like calling for diversity and equality from the West. It's all bullshit, or it's all lies, because they simply don't care. They care that their vision now is implemented in West Asia. And unfortunately, this vision includes people from Al Qaeda and ISIS and all these people that we saw since 2011, killing and beheading, and everybody here, and of course on the West and the East, we're asking who are these guys, from where they came, why in this century we're seeing such a thing. And unfortunately now the same guys now rule Syria, which is like was a very important country. Syria, the history, Syria, the people, Syria, the art, Syria, the cinema, culture, everything. Unfortunately, now they are ruling, and of course, everybody is like they are like treating them as if they are the real people that liberated Syria. Although I have to say it, and we said it again, they didn't fight. Damascus was given to them. They didn't do anything. What they did was killing innocent people for like 14 years.
They're still doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but now they're doing it under the law. And for them, these are people that are somebody was killed. Okay, this was with Bashar al-Assad, so we can kill him. So you can't fight this. You can't fight this. Even yes, Timan, you can't find this. Fight this. Yani, if Al Jazeera and CNN and BBC and the Americans, the EU, the Gulf countries are with you, يعني you can do whatever you want, unfortunately, because these people currently rule most of the region or control most of the mainstream media in this region.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think the Western constructs are becoming harder and harder and harder to maintain because the political power economy is declining rapidly in the West. And so I think whereas in the past, 10, 20, 30 years ago, whatever they decided, they could make stick. Now people are poking holes in this. I'm not saying anything's changing immediately. It's because the world order needs to shift. The multilateral institutions need to take action. Same with over Gaza, over Syria, etc.
What's happening, Charmaine? Because right now we're talking about this, and just yesterday the European Council lifted the sanctions on Syria, and then imposed some sanctions on a couple of they say Turkish extremists who are part of the Syrian armed forces that are currently ethnically cleansing strategic areas of Syria. So they are, like they are moving to lift the sanctions. The U.S. is also like starting to lift these sanctions. And I know we've talked about this in the podcast before, exactly why that is. But what international order? Who's going to come and step up and actually do something?
I'm not expecting anyone to do that. I mean, that's the vacuum we're in now. In terms of international law and authority exercised by international organizations. What I'm saying is the reason we're now hearing, for instance, Western leaders start to criticize Israel and Western media and politicians pretending that they're taking out the bad elements in Syria and the bad elements in Iraq, ISIS related things is just their way of pretending that there's action being taken, right? While while allowing space for their project to grow. They never had to do that before. They would just, set the scene for their project. They would implement it militarily, or through intelligence operations, and it would be a done deal. And now they're having all the time to push back. It's the same thing with the Syrian conflict. I mean, with social media was there during the Syrian conflict. Why do you think they took uh, Jolani, who was first a deputy leader of ISIS, then became the head of Al Qaeda in Syria, then which became Al Nusra? It was something else, and then became Hayat Tahrir al Sham. Is they just had to keep reworking this. In the past, they'd only have to go with one of their, one of their constructs, they had to rename this guy and his organizations 5 or 6 times before he was able to get to Damascus. This is why I don't think they're going to be able to sustain it. Like social media is telling us what's happening in Syria, and eventually um, they're going to have to accept that. And what will happen, in my view, is they'll just axe Jolani like they're axing the jihadis they supported and paid and armed for, well over a decade. The ones who were not on board the Israel project, are not on board the Gulf project, are not on board, their diversity project. They're just killing them off now. Eventually, even Jolani's disposable, right? It's something, by the way, we're seeing potentially happening with Netanyahu. So we're going to get into that a bit later, I think you said, Esteban.
But don't you think they fully succeeded in Syria?
No, to succeed, that means there's just zero pushback.
Yeah, but now Julani is a national hero, not only in Syria,
By
across
who?
the Arab world.
No, that's what no, that's what headlines in the Arab media are saying. That's what the masses are reading. Within no time, don't forget what happened in 2011. The dictator is killing his own people. Okay, there's a revolution, and it's a popular one. Within a few years, we saw that there were armed people killing Syrians.
Yeah,
Okay,
but the Arab
jihadis sponsored by other governments. That it wasn't a popular revolution. Okay, and it wasn't a revolution because revolutions aren't based in 5 foreign capitals and armed entirely by foreign government adversary governments. What I'm saying is, enough time passes, the West no longer dominates the narratives. Okay, and I've said this many times before.
But Al Jazeera and Arabiya do.
Yeah, they do, but they listen, they may dominate the narratives, but they can no longer control the outcomes because there's a lot of players. First of all, the rising second pole in this world, Russia, China, Iran, others, BRICS, SCO, etc., that are pushing back on the narratives. And as a social media, why do you think Western capitals are clamping down on people just talking about Palestine or wearing a keffiyeh? It's because they have lost control.
I know, but I'm talking about Al Julani. Every single Arab that I talk to and every single Lebanese who lives in Beirut that I talk to is very happy with Al Julani.
Yeah. Well, that's not the case with the ones I talk to necessarily. I'm just saying it's been what, December, right? January, February, March, April, May. It's been 5 months with a lot of PR at work for him, giving him, getting him on red carpets, meeting with world
It
leaders.
succeeded, that's what I'm saying.
No, Karim, this is what I'm saying. Give it time. Stand شوية. All right, give it time, and they will not control the narrative. This is why
Who will
already,
control the narrative?
listen, already 5 months in, the West is saying, okay, we're going to give sanctions relief, but we're going to sanction these people because they know they have to blame someone for what the world is clearly seeing, their atrocities being carried out in Syria. Before, it was like, it was entirely their narrative and none other.
Well, I think this report at the end of the day, what leaves us is just more evidence. First of all, Gulf involvement in Syria, which we have so many reports about. Just go to the Cradle, check it out.
And
We
French.
have,
Don't forget the French,
yes,
man,
exactly.
rolling
The
out the
French.
red carpet for Al Qaeda.
Oh my God, Macron, but nobody has more hard eyes for Sharad than Donald Trump.
Do you think that's why his wife gave him a left
Slapped him in
hook?
the face.
Yeah.
In any case, but let's move on. We will obviously, continue on this subject as more information comes out. Let's move on to Israel, right? Like really the meat of everyday news these past few months. Let me start by talking about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, what's happening with that, just to give a little update. We have at least 10 Palestinians killed. We have multiple dozens injured. We have several disappeared, right? Kidnapped, as they are trying to go up to the south of Gaza or to the Netzarim corridor, to this U.S.-Israeli aid scheme known as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that is using mercenaries to hand over, meal kits. You have the Palestinians since Monday attempting to go and, get the food from these places, but at multiple times, I think every day that since it started operations, you have reports of shootings, that Israeli troops have just started shooting at the Palestinians. First, they say because they are, overcrowding, overrunning the distribution centers. I mean, what do you expect? You've been starving these people for almost 3 months, and then you make them go into this what is being described as an aid ghetto to get these, little meal kits, and then they get shot at. It's just exactly what I will compare it to, because it's the clearest comparison. Is last year aid pier. Remember the aid pier, the military pier for Gaza that was in operations for just a few months. And most of that time being reconstructed, being rebuilt, being washed ashore. At the end of the day, this was Biden's big scheme to block humanitarian aid from, or to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza via the proper means, right? Via the
To
crossings,
control
via
the
the
aid
UN.
entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happened with the pier? Nothing. At the end of the day, they spent tens of millions of dollars. Dozens of U.S. soldiers were injured. At least one was killed, according to a recent report. And they delivered 1 day worth of food for Gaza in all of that time. That's what happened with the 80 pier. And then they had to, take it back and essentially admit what every single humanitarian agency was saying at the time, which was, this is not going to work. This is not humanitarian aid. This is distracting for the actual situation. And also, what was it used for? For the massacre. For the massacre in a Nusayrat camp, in which Israeli troops, with the support of the US, using the Gaza aid pier, killed about 300 Palestinians trying to rescue, what was it, like 6 captives or something like that? In any case, this whole, GHF distribution centers is just a redux of the aid pier. Is again to promote the displacement of Palestinians, to lure them into this tiny zone with the promise of food after starving them for almost 3 months. And now we're hearing these reports that they're getting shot at, that they're getting kidnapped, that they are simply being corralled into this tiny area of land with images that completely resemble those of Poland in 1945. So, given all of this context, now what are we seeing is condemnations. We are seeing European nations. We are seeing more and more nations all of a sudden start giving these statements saying, "Oh, what Israel is doing is wrong. What Israel is doing is, they need to let aid in. They need to let the UN take control of this. It cannot be, just these mercenaries of this shadowy company, Safe Reach Solutions, UG Solutions, who are behind." The GHF scheme, who were companies that were just set up a few months ago. There's no actual information who's funding
They're
this.
all Western intelligence cutouts, or special forces, or former special forces, or mercenaries. This is how the West, it's like they used to hide behind NGOs, and now they can no longer do that. Like they're showing their faces. By the way, it's just goes to my point, Esteban, that I was arguing with Karim about, that the Western constructs are not lasting. Before, 2 decades ago, they could do something or say something, and it just was, as though God had, deemed it such. And now their constructs are falling apart. They're full of holes. Your pure example is a perfect one. That was going to be what would save Gaza. Couldn't even, withstand any scrutiny, couldn't withstand the waves either, you know.
Couldn't withstand the waves, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think Jolani, he's gonna, more light will shine on this guy every month, because they're just doing horrific things in Syria. Okay, there aren't enough red carpets and glitzy, balls to honor this Al Qaeda leader that will distract people away from what his minions, his goons, his army of jihadis, foreign extremists, takfiris, are doing throughout Syria, and doing against minorities in Syria, and doing against anyone, even fellow Sunni Muslims who disagree with them. They're even killing themselves now. Last week, we talked about takfiri versus takfiri. This is going to escalate too. Jolani's days are numbered, is what I'm saying. In the end, he is disposable. They have spent a lot of money on him, but he is disposable, and they'll bring out some other Muslim Brotherhood guy who wasn't wearing a combat thing, and put him to. Do you remember for how long the Syrian so-called revolution went on? They kept the Syrian, the SNC and stuff, the Friends of Syria, whatever. They kept every year it seemed like they would bring out a new figure who was going to be the one who to galvanize the Syrian people against Assad. And it never stuck because it was just PR. There were no legs to these campaigns.
So
Wait,
let's go
Karim
back
wanted to say something.
I yeah, I want to say I don't think they will get rid of him because everybody loves him. From Morocco to Tunis to Libya to Egypt to Iraq to Lebanon, everybody loves him. There's pictures in Lebanon for Julani, and no, not Julani put them. People loved Julani. People love his way. They think he's a man. They think he's the savior. They implemented in their heads through the media and Al Jazeera and whatever that this guy will liberate Palestine, and this is the way how to fight, and that the Abbasiyin and Umayyin, like the golden history of Arabs, is coming back because of this man, and people believe it, Sharmin.
That's
That's
right,
one.
but it's 5 months in.
Yeah.
Mark my words, it's 5 months in. If Jolani continues this way and he can't unify Syria and minority are still being hurt. One of our Syria correspondents sent me pictures during this week of minority neighborhoods throughout Syria that have barricaded themselves in for protection against these
Yeah,
guys.
because these are
It's 5
minorities.
months in, and we've seen this guy shaking hands with Trump, with all the Gulf leaders, with Macron in Paris. There's a media blitz going on to protect him. 5
And
months
it's
in,
working.
like now, it won't work.
Remember what he said, right? That it's gonna take a few years to build to make a constitution. That is gonna take like 5 years for this interim government. It's just started.
Let's be honest, Saudi Arabia, look at this country, which is everybody wants to go and work there, and they cut money. They don't have constitution, so I think it's
That's
normal.
not the point. Let me tell you, all the millions of Syrian refugees, if you notice, by the way, okay, important point. 3 to 4 million in Turkey, I don't know, under 2 million in Lebanon, again, over a million in Jordan. Why haven't they gone back to Syria? Economy is a big reason, 100%. But remember, for years, we were told that these Syrian refugees were clinging on to these in these neighboring countries and wouldn't go back because they hated Assad and they feared consequences. No, there was a war going on in their country, a foreign war against Syria. There was there was instability and also economic instability, okay, because there were sanctions, et cetera, against the country. That's why they didn't go back. But I could turn the story around and say 6 million Syrians outside the country and many, many more in Europe, okay, are not going back because of Jolani, right? This is how they play it. Don't forget, these refugees are not going back to Syria. Why?
Okay, so this was
So
my
they
first
don't all love
comment.
him. They don't all love him, please.
Most of them.
No, based on
Okay,
what?
based on the things that I watched, the things that I read, my friends, and everybody was happy of what happened in the Sahel. Don't think Arabs hated it or see it as a massacre. They see it as a punishment of the remnants of Syrian regime. That's exactly what people feel, Sharbin.
That's the power of the
So
media. That's the
That's what
power
I'm
of the
saying.
course,
media.
But
this
it's
is the
early
power of the
days.
media.
It's early days. That's all
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
saying.
I know. I'm telling you, he's like, he came.
He's a messiah.
He's a
He's
messiah.
not.
But
He's
now,
Karim's
that's what.
exaggerating. The people who love him, they don't act like that either. Okay, there's some that would. Okay,
No, I
mostly
told you, I'm not
religious
telling you he's
extremists.
a messiah and he will not commit mistakes. But currently, most of the Arab world loves him. So this was my first command, and my second command, which is I partially agree with you. You said now the Western narrative doesn't work. But the problem is, Sharmeen, there's no alternative. So if it doesn't work, it will be, if it works, it's bad, and if it didn't work, it's bad because there's no alternative. As what's happening in Gaza, we have to wait and see what the United States decisions will be to get aid to Gaza. There's no alternative. Russia can do it. Arabs can do it. China can do it. Palestinian abroad that have money, and they have high positions can do it. So there's no alternative. And also, and you said it, Sharmin, when you said no, he will not last. Let's go back a little bit for about Julani. You said they will get somebody instead of him. Also, we're referring to the West. The West narrative is not working, and many people now they hate the West more than ever. but there is no alternative. Nobody can step in and fill their shoes, unfortunately.
Sorry, he does not have control over all of Syria. He just has control over a few areas. Let's not exaggerate, okay? No, and number two, okay, there is a power vacuum in the world since unipolarity is clearly dying, right? And this becomes a very chaotic time for the world. They don't need someone to replace Sholani. They just ultimately need what the Israelis, what the Americans, what the British need is to keep Syria divided and weak. So yeah, they don't need anyone else. Listen, forget it. In this time of chaos, when the whole world is changing, the whole world is changing in a way that we've not seen, okay, since the world wars. In this kind of change does come chaos, but also agency. And you have rising powers, a second pole, and they're going to come up with solutions.
Let's put a pin on this for a second, right? Because this is something we're going to get into in a bit with a different topic that is very interesting. But before we get there, I want us to head back. I think we covered Jolani pretty thoroughly at this point. Let's focus a bit on the situation in Gaza and what I said a few minutes ago, the condemnations, or not. I don't know if I would even call them, condemnations, more like the criticism that is coming from European leaders. You have, the Prime Minister of Spain, the German Chancellor, the head of the European Union, the foreign policy chief, the French foreign minister, etc. So coming out and saying that this war needs to be stopped, the aid needs to be coming in. You have some nations in particular, like Pedro Sanchez has said, like, oh, we're going to block Israeli arms shipments to Israel through Spanish ports. They haven't done that. They say they did not. The arms are still flowing. What do you make of this, right? What do you make? And actually, we just one last fact that I want to throw in here as this criticism continues to grow. This week, the United States delivered its 800th plane load of arms to Israel, 90,000 tons in total since October 7, 2023. So while you have this criticism going, well, the weapons are just keep coming and coming and coming and nonstop. So with that being said, what do you make of this? Are the Europeans all of a sudden, growing a conscience, or are they simply covering their own asses?
Look, I think there are several things we can clearly see. One is that this appears to be a very orchestrated campaign, that suddenly European Western leaders have been given a green light to criticize Israel. It just absolutely did not happen before, with the exception of obviously the Spanish prime minister here and there, things like that.
Even the dates of the statements are pretty close together. They extend from 24 to 28 May.
They all happen in like a week. So there is a concerted effort to do this. This is an orchestrated campaign. Now, why would they do this? One, as you said, covering their asses. I personally think that the liability, like legal ramifications to these leaders who basically armed a genocide while it was obvious it was going on, okay? The fact that the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are looking at genocide and war crimes in relations to Israel's attacks on Gaza, has made this a liability legally, okay, for many of these people. That wouldn't do it though, in my view, because at the same time, Esteban, on this podcast, we have, just a few weeks ago, we were reading statements by 3 former Israeli prime ministers who are absolutely part of the deep state in Israel. Okay, these guys aren't like a Jimmy Carter. They're like a Clinton. They're like a Bush. They're part of the deep state. All 3 former prime ministers said that we're heading towards a civil war, that what Netanyahu is doing is dangerous. And then another one last week said, we are committing war crimes. He straight out came out and said it, and said it so ferociously, Ehud Olmer, right, the former prime minister, that it was quite stunning. This is what you'd expect an opponent of Israel to say, but no, a member of the deep Israeli state, a former prime minister, said this. So I think it's very possible that all these Western leaders and Israeli war criminals are looking to extricate themselves from this mess, because they all conclude that there's no way to win in Gaza except basically wiping out the population, right? Or removing them. And that's not going to go down with anyone. Nobody's going to tolerate that. So they have concluded that the way to save Israel is to get rid of Netanyahu. That's my view. So just like I believe Jolani is going to be dispensable in, I don't know, in a few months, in a few years, whatever time period that takes, I think Netanyahu's now become absolutely dispensable. But the thing is, Netanyahu is potentially the most wily politician on this planet. And he survives time after time when they've buried him. So let's see what happens. Or maybe this is a way to force Netanyahu to make a decision that he doesn't want to make, which is to accept a permanent ceasefire brokered by the Americans. Okay? This is why I think the European leaders are doing this, because when that many of them come out within the same week, including Germany, okay, Germany, who basically will never criticize Israel over anything, because they're so guilty for things they didn't do.
The
Germans
reason
today.
of state. I mean, like yesterday, I saw this report on Israeli channel 11 News that they were talking about this very heavy diplomatic effort by the Israeli government, in particular against Germany, for Germany to not even hint at an arms embargo. Like, don't you dare even hint at this, because well, first of all, what you said, the German complicity in what's been happening, including the persecution of journalists, including the deportation of pro-Palestine activists. And then you have the fact that Germany is the second nation behind the United States to provide the most weapons to Israel. About 30% of the weapons that flood to Israel come from Germany. So I think there you have your answers as to exactly why Israel is promoting this. And
And look at this. I mean, we have some of the statements here from the Spanish Prime Minister, the Germans, the EU, everybody. It's May 28th, okay, May 26th, May 26th, May 28th, May 24th, May 24th, May 24th, May 25th. I mean, that's just a small collection of them. This is so orchestrated, and it is for a purpose. And I think they're either going to get rid of Netanyahu, or under threat of getting rid of Netanyahu, force him to do the unthinkable, which is a permanent ceasefire, which means his cabinet will potentially fall apart, his coalition government, and he goes to prison. So either way, it doesn't look good for Netanyahu. Let's see if he can pull another rabbit out of his hat. But, now these guys have put the words out there. His allies have put these words out there. They can't really retract them either. They can't do to Netanyahu what they did to Jolani. There's no amount of PR that can cover up
to
for what we've seen.
rehabilitate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would need a pretty insane amount of PR. Karim, let's hear from you. Do you agree with Charmin? Do you think Netanyahu's days are numbered now that all of these European nations all of a sudden are finding it a bit distasteful to see the images coming out of Gaza?
I think so, because clearly Israel lost the PR, and they want the Israelis, or they want Israel to keep existing, and the only way is to stop this war, because now we are seeing that individuals and politicians and companies, Israeli companies, they can't operate freely as before, and even Israeli tourists, we talked about it previously, they are not even feeling comfortable in many places, including in Italy, in Thailand, and many places, and even Dubai, and they don't even feel comfortable in Dubai. So that's really a thing. And I think because the West, they want the persistence of Israel, and they are afraid Israel will lose so much because of the war. They want to blame everything on Netanyahu. Not the problem is not the existence of Israel. No, the problem is Netanyahu. So now they
Yeah,
are
the problem is
making
not
all
the
this.
occupation or the apartheid or the genocide. The problem is this one man. Actually, I want to just point out something I want to mention, and I want us to put the video here. The students at Dakar University in Senegal chasing out the Israeli ambassador who was there for, like, I don't know exactly why he was there, but these amazing images of these brave students, waving the Palestinian flag and calling him out. And this is happening more and more in the global south, right? In the global south, it's been happening for a bit now. But now you have it also in these European capitals, the actual leaders. So, I'm a bit of a skeptic on this whole situation, because I'm more on the side of Netanyahu is the wildest politician alive, and he's going to find a way to land on his feet. You even have like some of the opposition figures in Israel continuing to offer him a lifeline, right? Let Ben Gvir walk, let Smotrich walk out of your coalition, and we will, like a kind of like a provide a cushion for you in a sense, right? So a different coalition government, I would imagine. So it's not like this is not like Netanyahu's final moment, right? It could be leading to his final moment, but I think he still has plenty of off ramps because they are being offered to him.
I think currently the Europeans are trying to blame everything on Netanyahu. I don't know if the Americans agree of what the Europeans are doing, because we know that Europe alone can't stop Netanyahu. The number one provider and ally and everything for Israel is currently the United States anti-Trump. I don't know if they are preparing a Ehud Olmert.
They're playing good cop, bad cop. For sure, the Trump, the Steve Witkoff team is coordinating with the Europeans on this, because this way, Witkoff is trying to get the Israelis to reach a kind of ceasefire that Hamas would accept, right? Otherwise, this is never going to stop. And so these guys, the Europeans, get to be like this, create a pressure chamber around the Israeli government whilst Witkoff is negotiating. It's the tactic, simply that.
But they took decisions, Sharmin. Yani they took actions.
This morning, this was this report that Witkoff had a very tense meeting with Dermot, the Israeli strategic whatever minister. And then you also have these reports of Donald Trump having a tense phone call with Netanyahu. Remember when the New York Times came out and said Joe Biden called Netanyahu an asshole and then hung up the phone on him? What came out of that? Nothing. But now we're hearing similar reports about Donald Trump, right? And I think actually, Sharmin, what you're saying makes sense. Karim, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I want to say that the Europeans, I think they are maybe they are playing alone in this, or maybe they are preparing Ehud Olmert, and they are doing the PR and the propaganda against Netanyahu to show maybe the Americans, look, this is a solution. Because what Olmert said yesterday, he said many weird things, to be honest, and the most important thing that he said is matches what the Europeans are saying. He said the two-state solution and the establishment of Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital is the path to peace in the region and to the world. So I think this coming from him, and he was a previous prime minister, and now after what he said, we saw protests in the streets in Israel. Usually, parents of the captives, they arranged these protests, but yesterday it was like it came out after his speech, or you know what I mean. I think they are preparing something, but if the Americans says no, as if nothing happens. If the Americans put their hands with the Europeans to prepare Olmert, or to like blame everything on Netanyahu, I think, as Sharmin said, I think Netanyahu's days are numbered.
And now you have even the media, right? Just before we move on to the last topic of this week's episode, you also have like figures like Piers Morgan all of a sudden, like grilling the Israeli ambassador.
How many children have you killed?
Pierce, Israel is not
How
killing
many?
children. Think of them
Israel
as
is
human
killing
shields.
children every single day.
Pierce,
Why
this
pretend
is a blood
otherwise?
label you're putting on Israel.
Why
You know it's
pretend-
not true.
What? No, it's not actually. And what you're trying to do is be very weaselly with your words.
No, I'm not.
The truth is, you are killing a lot of children.
And talking about the dead children and how, I mean, it's very dishonest. Like for anybody who's been paying attention from day one, this is just hypocrisy. This is just covering your own ass. But at the same time, it's necessary because we cannot lose sight of what's happening in Gaza, right? Of what I described in these 8 ghettos that are being created, the expansion of the occupation, of the entirety of the Gaza Strip, and just the death, right? The children, the statements from the surgeons who come out of Gaza, just like every day they just get worse. So, are Netanyahu's days numbered? One would hope. One would hope. I don't know if the man is gonna, find a way out of this one. But knowing him,
They
he
might make a deal with him. They will tell him, we will not put you in jail, just resign, and we will take over. Many things will happen because they are in a critical situation also. Of course, what's happening in Gaza is the worst thing we have ever seen. But
If he's not prime minister, there's going to be a civil war, because his side have been unleashed in the most unimaginable way. People who are literally boasting about kills of children and babies and stuff like that. They want all Arabs dead. They want all Palestinians dead. these guys have been on a roll now, and they're not going to go back into their cages, and so this is going to be interesting. I
I
think
think
what
I saw
happens.
Dropside News report this week that there's tours. There's like these sightseeing tours to see what's happening in Gaza, right? That there's the coin operated, the things that you do at the Statue of Liberty or something to see it closer. They've established that, and they take like school children on trips to see the genocide unfold. So yes, exactly. This has been unleashed.
I can't. There, it's
And just for your point, it's not for free. You have to pay to use the. Sorry, I'm laughing, but it's so weird also.
By the way, I mean, I really think this is the time to segue because I have vowed to bring the big picture at the Cradle to explain the little picture. And we can see that. So just something that we're going to talk about now is a meeting in Malaysia between ASEAN, the Southeast Asian economic organization, um, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council of 6 Persian Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Qatar, etc., and China. And this is you see, as the West is fighting a war with Russia on one front, fighting Israel's war for it on another front. Okay, um, the East, the Eurasian powers, are going from strength to strength. They're doing deals.
Charmin, let me cut in. Let me cut in and actually give some background on this meeting, right? Kuala Lumpur hosts this first trilateral summit between, as you said, the ASEAN countries, this 10 or 15 nation bloc. No, is it 10 or 15? 10 member bloc. No, 10. ASEAN is 10. Then you have with China, with the GCC, with the Gulf Cooperation Council. First time ever to discuss, cooperation and to essentially find a path forward through the U.S. tariffs, through Trump's economic war, economic coercion plan. They come to this agreement to, like the statements are exactly what you would expect: the boost economic integration, connectivity, the Belt and Road Initiative, etc. But one thing in particular that I want to mention is the GCC, right? The members of the GCC are going to potentially be included now in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This is the largest free trade zone in the world. It comprises 15 countries, including those of ASEAN. It comprises as well China and others. And now there's going to be discussions to include the GCC into this free trade zone. So this is a news story that has not been really reported as much as it should, because it comes at the same time as, I don't know if you guys saw this video yesterday of this reporter at the White House asking Trump what does he think about this new term that has been coined for him, which is taco. And what it stands for is Trump always chickens out, right? With like a pulling the tariffs and all of that, and he did not like that, right? I'm sure we can put the video. He did not like that term or that question at all. But look at what's happening, right? The Arab Gulf, the Gulf Persian Gulf nations are meeting with this huge bloc of Southeast Asian nations that in 2023 already discussed de-dollarizing their trade. In 2023, they were already having the discussions necessary to start trading in local currencies and to drop the USD due to US sanctions. This is, during Biden's presidency. This is not even when Trump comes with his tariffs. And now you have them integrating China, and you have them integrating the GCC. And the GCC in particular, and just to tie it to everything we've been discussing, when when Witkoff is supposedly, like being very impatient, let's say, with the Israelis as is Trump, it's apparently because the Gulf nations, which Trump visited last week or 2 weeks ago, told him, we do not want war with Iran. We do not want war with Iran. That's what they told him, and that's what's feeding into the nuclear talks, and that's what's feeding into the Witkoff thing, and also into this GCC now joining the potentially joining the world's largest free trade zone.
But look at the optics of this. I mean, Trump goes over to the Persian Gulf on a 3-nation visit there and comes away boasting about a haul of a few $trillion, which is a substantial hit to those countries' treasuries, all right, comes away taking their money. China and the ASEAN invite the GCC over. Win-win. Okay. China removes all visa requirements for GCC nationals to its country. Okay. And they're talking about actual trade, not we're just going to sell you goods, right? Because already the GCC countries, like most countries in the world, China is usually the biggest trading partner. But
Let me give you one figure. In 2024, ASEAN's total trade value with China and GCC countries surpassed $900 billion, almost twice the 453 billion in trade with the US.
yeah, yeah. So what's happening is Trump comes over and takes their money, okay, big chunks of their GDP basically, and these guys are invited over to Southeast Asia and with China there, and they're treated as partners. Maybe there are some conditions like let's just trade in our own currencies, which is a plus. It's a plus for them, right? I mean, one side, okay, the Americans come in and basically steal their money, all right, and the other side says, let's both win in any scenario we develop, and you are equal partners. It's just so obvious who's going to win this contest, which is why when I look at things like Ukraine and Gaza and threats of war against Iran, the U.S. and its allies are in an unwinnable situation. Whatever they do, of course, they can drop hundreds of tons of bombs, but that's not winning anything. That's not a strategy. There's no strategy in the West. You know, on the other side, it's all peaceful development, okay? Soft power, economic growth, win-win situations for all. On the other side, zero-sum game. Give me your money. You want protection? Give me your money. I'm gonna let loose terrorists on your soil. You're gonna pay me for protection. It's a total scam. It's the kind of things that would happen in tough neighborhoods. Protection money. That's what it is. Yeah. So I don't. Who's gonna win the long term? Obviously, the new multipolar world, and the West is hemorrhaging money by its wars. So I mean, when you grasp that large picture, you understand why the situation in Gaza, the animosity or against Iran, sanctions, wars in Ukraine, drones, missile, massive arms sales, it's going to just come to a close at some point much faster than it would have had these conflicts not come to the fore. I would argue that the Ukraine war seriously crippled Western economies, especially European ones, and the Gaza war dropped the veils on all the bullshit humanitarian democracy talk that the West had strung us along with for decades. And those two have completely revealed the core vulnerabilities, foundational vulnerabilities in Western power projection. The end.
So let me give you just a couple of more pieces of information that are very interesting, that are very recent. Like came just ahead of this ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur. One, a Bloomberg report from 9 May talking about banks and financial brokers in the West trying to bypass the US dollar in Asian markets, that they are increasingly asking to trade in the yuan, the Hong Kong dollar, or the Emirati dirham, or the euro even. This is as part of this kind of like pivot, right? Like we cannot keep using the USD because they're using it as a weapon of war. And second thing, there's something we've discussed this in the podcast already, but just to bring it back up, a recent a poll by the Democracy Perception Index, which shows that most countries in the world are now prefer China, have a more favorable view of China than they do of the United States. So U.S. popularity just like sinking, not just of their government, but also of their currency. With that being said, Karim, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, it's reasonable that most of the people will prefer China because China didn't kill a million Iraqi. China didn't send weapons to Israel to kill over 60,000 Palestinians. China didn't try to invade Somalia in the 90s and it didn't destroy Libya. So, of course, people will prefer China. And, of course, countries should prefer China because China is not a bully.
But by the way, in past polls of the Arab world, at least I'm talking about, because we have regular annual polls on this part of the world, uh, China and Russia have more or less stayed static on those polls. They haven't gone up much, they haven't gone down much, whereas the US goes up and down depending on what's going on in the world at the time. I honestly attribute this bump to that Chinese guy on TikTok who revealed the bags, revealed the scam of the Western luxury goods market. It shifted the perception of all of Gen Z and all the way back to boomers. It did, half the world, women, handbags, whatever. And I'm definitely not a handbag person, but it shifted perceptions so fabulously. You couldn't have paid for this kind of PR. You really couldn't have. And for sure now we're seeing um many more doors open to China. It's been just a few weeks. It hasn't been that long. And you know how in the Arab world, like they won't buy, they think like Chinese washing machines or microwaves are like a quality less. They'll like save more money to buy the Western brand, the German brand, and or
Or the cars.
yeah, exactly. That's switched like this now.
Yeah. Not only the bags, also there's a teenager called Aishu Speed. He's an American. And he did something, and I don't think it was planned. I think the CIA and whatever, NSA or whatever, they next time if he wants to go to China, they will down his plane because what
He
he did.
single-handedly undid decades of propaganda just by visiting China for a few weeks. One last item, and before we go, because it ties into this, Elon Musk out of the U.S. government. He's gone. Dodge, it's under the hands of who knows whom, and at this point. And how much money did he cut? How much did he achieve in his little crusade against government
around
spending?
167 billion. Yesterday, by mistake, I read this number. I didn't prepare it by mistake. I read it. Since Trump campaign started, Elon Musk gained around 167 billion dollars, and this is huge. And also, he previously said that this is harming him as a person.
Well, his Tesla dealerships are being set on fire. Yeah. But also he's become the absolute symbol of mockery in what he would call liberal media, because of having a post, he became a much more you could now talk about Elon Musk every day because he had an official post. The other thing is, I mean, what he says, I don't know what the story is, but from what he says, you can see, he said, look, Congress is approving it. The administration is putting out budgets now that are putting, making the whole purpose of Doge irrelevant, and he's not wrong about that, right? First, Trump came in, they cut USAID or USAID, they cut all these like CIA projects, right? And now he's bringing them back, okay? Because he's doing the taco thing, right? He really is. It's not just on tariffs. He's doing this on like the cuts he wants.
And because Musk was very critical of what did Trump call it, the big beautiful bill or something that is going to add $4 trillion to the national deficit. So how are you supposed to cut deficit when you keep
I just
adding to
want
it?
to clarify a point also. I think why Elon Musk did all this because he convinced Trump to fund more uh, things related to space, and his company SpaceX will benefit, I think, billions and billions of dollars.
Maybe it's not been a good look for Elon Musk in the end. If I were him, I would have exited too, because there's no point in like poking tiny holes in this, in the US deficit. It's not possible. And you're going to end up being like the guy who couldn't do it. Better to get out early. Anyways, why are we talking about the Americans? All this.
He's South African.
I feel like
You want global
updates
South,
on-
Charmaine?
no,
Elon Musk is South African.
that's true. I found one of the early members of BRICS, right?
He's a persecuted minority. Actually, no. One thing that I completely skipped over, and we don't have to comment on this, but I do want to mention it, is the attack yesterday, the Israeli attack in Yemen that destroyed Yemen's last civilian airplane. and the Israeli media claiming that it was like a military target.
Civilian airplane or airport?
Civilian airplane
Target
in,
is Sana'a
in, the,
International
in Sana'a
Airport,
International
and
Airport.
but destroyed a civilian airplane that had transported Yemeni patients to Queen Aliyah Airport in Jordan and elderly pilgrims to Jeddah. This is the military target that the Israeli army bombs in Yemen.
Dirtbags, what can we say? At least the Americans have realized the irrelevance, the impossibility of defeating Yemen. The Israelis do it, their PR shots for their own population, honestly, not for the world anymore, because nobody's buying this. And so they're
And in
only doing
response,
it.
Yemen has vowed a hot summer. That's what they said today. There's going to be a hot summer for Israel.
God willing, or as they say in this region, inshallah, right?
So with that, we have come to the end of this program. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. To all the new viewers as well, thank you so much for discovering our channel. Please leave a like. Please share this video. Subscribe to our channel. And as usual, follow us on our social media platforms on X and on Telegram. And most important of all, check out our Patreon, where you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle. I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.